This is part two, and I'll talk about specifically now when talking to my mom what problems arise from having, different function strength. When talking to her, there's two major like problems. Well, there's more than two problems, but there's two different types of problems. There's being confronted by what I'm bad at all the time. So she expects me to remember a ton of different things, like tiny things like appointments. So an example of this is like she'll tell me, she'll say something like, "Oh, you will have a doctor's appointment at 2 o'clock on Thursday, 2 weeks from now." And that day will come and she'll say, "Okay, time for your appointment." I'll be like, "What? When did you tell me this?" And she'll kind of just look at me and be like, "I told you 2 weeks ago. Why don't you remember?" And I'm just, how can I remember something that you told me 2 weeks ago? Especially something like that. Like, I was probably thinking about something when she told me to, and I'll like nod my head and be like, "Oh, I got that." But 2 minutes from then, I'm not gonna remember what she told me, especially not like 2 weeks. Even if like I was paying attention and like trying to remember that she told me that, I would have never remembered something that she told me 2 weeks ago because I've already moved on and started thinking about all these other things. Just trying to remember this one tiny detail, which is a doctor's appointment, which doesn't go along with everything else I think about normally. Like, planning isn't something I do often, unless it's long range, like I plan to go to college, but I haven't planned out all the details yet. Um, I'm just not going to remember those things, and being confronted by that can sometimes stress me out a little bit. Um, Also, just the constant exposure to extroverted feeling can get on my nerves sometimes. Like, I try to be patient with it, but especially after a long day at school, I can't handle, which won't be as much of a problem now that I've just graduated, but I can't handle being around her all the time, mostly because of how much emotion she expresses over tiny little things. Like, an example would be I come home from school and she asks me, "Oh, how was your day?" And I'll say, "Oh, it was okay." And she'll be like, "That's great." And I'm just looking at her like, that's a very large emotional reaction to something that I just said that was so small. And I get frustrated with that, kind of. And just not knowing how to react emotionally in return, or not knowing how to like deal with her emotions at all, or what to think of them. Just, to me, they seem kind of tedious. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to be around her because of that. Another way that it's hard for me to talk to her is that she's not good at what I'm naturally really good at. So, not that she's not smart, but she's just better at different things than I am. So especially when it comes to third function things, because people, I picked this up from Type Tips, I love his videos. People think that they're really good at their third function, but normally they aren't. It's how they're awkward. So my mom thinks she's really good at introverted thinking. So she thinks she's really good at logical thinking, but I'm naturally very, very good at it. And I can see a lot of this sounds narcissistic. I promise I know that I'm very flawed. But I can see how, like, there are holes in her logic or issues. Like, normally it's just she's not considering all the different possibilities, which is any related, which is her inferior function. But my auxiliary function is any, so I'm good at it to a certain extent. Not as good as an ENTP would be, but I'm good at it, you know. There's another type that has any dominant, but I can't remember what it was. I'm so sorry. But anyway, she she doesn't realize that, I feel like she doesn't realize that I'm really good at logical thinking, because sometimes she'll explain something to me very slowly and she'll go over every little thing, but I've already come to like the conclusion that she's getting to, and I get frustrated with that. Like, I've already figured out what she's telling me, but she's still talking to me. So I have to still sit there and listen when I've already started to try and move on to other thoughts in my head, if that makes any sense. Like, it forces me to slow down, and it's not presenting me with any new information. And she not only explains something slowly, but she explains it several times, like, not like several times over the course of like a week, but like several times at once. Like, she'll say it, and then she'll say it again with slightly different wording that doesn't change the meaning, it doesn't add anything to it. It's the exact same thing, but with just different words, and then she'll do it again. And I get very frustrated with this. And even I've told her before, just get to the point and tell me what you're trying to say, because I don't always have the patience for it. And she takes offense to this often, like, because people don't like to realize that they aren't as good at something as they thought they were. So, like, when my dad and he's also an INTP, and sometimes we'll be in a long car ride and we'll start talking about psychology, like Myers-Briggs specifically, and she doesn't know very much about this topic, but sometimes she'll chime in and say something, and my dad and I will be like, well, no, that's not necessarily how it is, you don't know this and this, and we'll explain to her why her logic is wrong by presenting her with more variables, which I'm sure just stresses her out because she's any inferior. And she sometimes takes offense to this, and like sometimes she'll say, well, like when I point out to her where she's like missed something, she often, like, if she gets worked up enough, she'll say, you don't know everything, or she'll say, you think you're smarter than everyone else, and I don't. Like, I understand that there are probably holes in my logic that I have yet to find, and I understand that, like, other people, while they might not be as good at one thing as me, like, it means that they're better at other things that I'm just not good at naturally, or I don't prefer. And maybe I don't make it clear to her that I understand that I'm flawed, but she gets very offended when I point out to her that she is flawed in that way, I guess. So that causes a lot of problems. Not that it's all bad. Like, I'm sure that if it weren't for my mom, I wouldn't have developed as much as I have now. Like, I've met other INTPs that haven't become as, not that I'm well-rounded quite yet. Like, I'm still very unbalanced, partly because of my age, like, with, like, functions and how I use them. But other INTPs that I've met are even less balanced than I am. But also in some ways, like, I feel like it might have also held me back. So there's bad things and good things that come with it. Like, I've been exposed to more extroverted feeling and more introverted sensing than I would have otherwise been, I think. Which in some ways is good and in some ways it's bad. Like, I thought there was something wrong with me because my mom seemed to have thought that there was something wrong with me. And then when I found out I wasn't, I was very happy about it, and I was able to, like, I had a good reason to dive into psychology and learn more about that. So I have all this knowledge because I thought that there was something wrong with me, which seems weird, but like, in some ways it's helped me become a better person, I think, and become more open-minded and just more understanding of things that I otherwise wouldn't have been. And my dad's noticed this. He's told me that, like, he's impressed with how well I've latched on to this topic. Like, I only got into this a few months ago, and it makes so much sense to me. And he took classes on this, and he told me that he wasn't able to understand it as well as I was so quickly. Not that this all sounds narcissistic now. I know I'm flawed, okay? But, like, I guess it's focusing on how I'm not flawed right now because I thought I was flawed for so long, if that makes any sense. I've gotten off topic. I've rambled. So, moving on. I think that my relationship with my mom will get a lot better as I get older because, like, my dad and my mom, they get along just fine most of the time. Like, they argue sometimes, but everyone argues. Um, so I think it's gonna come with maturity that I'm gonna be able to handle being around what I'm not good at for longer and being able to deal with people who aren't as good at what I'm good at longer. And it'll just come with age. Like, I think that has to do with getting older, just having more patience, basically. So,